My son, Cody, used to call me the old money bag. He would always make jokes about how frugal I was, but he had no idea that I was sitting on $11 million. It was at Thanksgiving when his wife, Anna, discovered my secret. She told him that she would divorce him if he didn't convince me to give her all of the money. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was in my home office, reviewing my quarterly reports, when Cody's voice suddenly cut through the evening quiet. It was like a sledgehammer smashing through glass. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips, and I looked up from the scattered papers on my mahogany desk. The lamplight made my hands look like they were trembling just a little. He told me he needed $40,000 for a BMW. I put my coffee cup down and replied that $40,000 seemed like a lot of money, and that maybe we should consider something more affordable. His laugh was harsh and bitter. He insisted that I was just being my usual stingy self, and that I couldn't pretend I couldn't afford it. His words felt like a physical blow. The soft clink of my cup on its saucer seemed to echo in the now chilly room. I heard the steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and it felt as though time had suddenly stopped. I reminded him that I had always provided for him, but he wasn't listening. He erupted, telling me I was just an old money bag who refused to share. He accused me of sitting around counting my money while my own son had to drive a piece of junk. I was shocked. The accusation just hung there between us like smoke. I stared at him, this man I had raised and sacrificed for, and he looked like a complete stranger. His face was twisted in rage and entitlement. I saw his expensive watch and designer jeans, which seemed to mock his claims of being poor. I could barely manage a whisper. Anna was right, he said to me. He told me she was right when she said I would never help them build a real life because I was too selfish to let go of my money. He slammed his fist down on my desk, and the picture frames on it jumped. He declared that I had proven her point. The door slammed with such force that a family portrait on the wall rattled. I watched from the window as his headlights swept across the driveway. He gunned the engine and gravel sprayed behind his tires like angry tears. I sat in the sudden quiet as the sound of his car faded into the Montana night. The familiar weight of my office, the business awards on the walls, and all the family photos, all the evidence of 30 years of hard work, suddenly felt foreign. Everything I had worked for and sacrificed had been reduced to 3 words: old money bag. I looked at the family photo on my desk. It was a picture of Sarah holding baby Cody while I stood behind them, young, proud, and hopeful. The glass was cracked now from where it had hit the desk. I knew something had to change. I picked up the damaged photo and traced the crack running through Sarah's smiling face. It seemed symbolic somehow, as if everything good in my life was being broken by careless anger. I remembered when Sarah passed away in 1998. Cody was 8 then, still small enough to crawl into my lap whenever a nightmare woke him up. The cancer took her quickly, only 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Suddenly, I was alone with a grieving boy and medical bills that threatened to crush my small construction company. I could remember those early mornings with painful clarity. I would get up at 5 a.m. to make Cody breakfast before I raced off to the job site. 16-hour days became routine for me. I would come home exhausted with paint under my fingernails and concrete dust in my hair. I would find Cody at the kitchen table, doing his homework. He would look up with Sarah's eyes and ask me why I had missed his school play again. I would pull him close and apologize, telling him that his dad just had to work extra hard right now. At Sarah's funeral, I had knelt beside her casket and whispered a promise that I would give him everything we couldn't. I gave him a private school education and the best education money could buy. While other parents complained about tuition costs, I wrote the checks without a single question. He took spring break trips to Europe, spent summers in California, and lived in a luxury apartment his senior year. Whatever Cody wanted, I provided. At his graduation, I watched him walk across the stage with so much pride in my chest. He barely even acknowledged me in the crowd, too busy celebrating with his friends whose parents hadn't sacrificed as much as I had. But seeing him succeed felt worth every single missed dinner, exhausted night, and dollar spent. I would tell myself that it was worth it just to see him succeed. Then came the first business failure, a restaurant. Cody had been so excited and confident. He told me that this was his chance and that he had it all figured out. $150,000 later, the doors were permanently shuttered due to poor management and expensive mistakes. I watched him fidgeting with his wedding ring, and I told him not to worry about paying me back because family helps family. The next disaster was a real estate flip. Cody and Anna had found what they called an incredible opportunity, a historic home they could renovate and sell for a huge profit. $80,000 in overruns and structural problems later, they sold it at a loss. I covered the difference without a single complaint. The tech startup was the most recent disaster. It was some app idea that never even made it past the planning stages. $120,000 vanished into market research and development costs that produced nothing but a fancy business plan. Each time, Cody promised me it would be different, and each time, I believed him because I wanted to. Each time, I rescued him from the consequences of his choices. I set the photo back on my desk, the crack still visible across Sarah's face. The pattern was so clear now, so obvious. I had spent 27 years teaching my son that failure had no consequences and that his dad would always be there with an open wallet and endless patience. And this is what he thought of me, a money bag. The bitter truth settled in my chest like a heavy stone. I hadn't raised a son, I had raised a user. I had become so focused on giving him everything that I had forgotten to teach him how to earn it. But the real change started 3 years ago when Cody brought Anna to dinner at the Cattleman's Club. I had arrived early, as I always did, and chose a quiet table overlooking the Yellowstone River. The restaurant was Billings' finest, the kind of place where business deals were made and celebrations were held. When Cody walked in with his arm around a stunning blonde, I could see how nervous he was. He was practically vibrating with the need to impress her. He told me, "Dad, this is Anna," and then introduced me. "Anna, this is my father, Dennis Butler." She extended a perfectly manicured hand to me, and I noticed how her eyes immediately swept over my clothes, my watch, and the car keys I placed on the table. The assessment was subtle but unmistakable. She was cataloging my worth. She said to me that Cody had told her I owned Butler Construction and that it must be quite lucrative in a growing market like this. There was no "nice to meet you," or "Cody has told me so much about you." It was just a direct question about how much money I earned. I should have recognized that as a red flag right away. She ordered the most expensive items on the menu without even glancing at the prices. When the check came, she didn't even pretend to reach for her purse. 6 months later, they were engaged, and Anna had an opinion on everything, especially the wedding. The venue she chose cost $50,000, which was more than a lot of people's annual salaries. When Cody hesitated at the price, she said that Dennis could afford it. There was no, "maybe we can find something smaller," or "we should contribute more ourselves." Just a casual assumption that I would pay for her dream wedding. Her mother had been even more direct at the bridal shower, cornering me by the gift table. She told me that Anna was so lucky and that she was really marrying into money. I wrote the check because I wanted Cody to be happy. At the reception, during the father-son dance, Anna had asked me about my investment portfolio as we swayed to the music. Her thank you speech mentioned my generous support with all the warmth of a business transaction. Later that night, I caught her photographing the inside of my wallet when I had left it at the head table. She claimed she was just admiring the family photos, but I had seen her angling the camera toward my credit cards. The changes in Cody started immediately after their honeymoon. Suddenly, he needed a better apartment because Anna thought they deserved nicer things. His visits became less frequent, and when he did come by, it was usually with his hand out. He would parrot Anna's phrases with uncomfortable precision, telling me that Anna thought I was old-fashioned with money and that successful people invest in their families. I watched as my son was replaced bit by bit with someone who saw me as an ATM with inconvenient emotions attached. Their social media accounts showed designer bags and expensive vacations while they claimed to be struggling financially. Anna's shopping addiction was becoming obvious, with $3,000 a month on clothes and accessories while my son asked me for grocery money. Sitting in my office, I realized that Anna had been poisoning Cody against me for years, turning my generosity into weakness and my love into something to be exploited. I should have seen it coming. At 2:17 a.m., I was still pacing my bedroom, unable to get the images of Cody's twisted face and Anna's calculating eyes out of my head. The digital clock's red numbers seemed to mock me, marking time I would never get back and chances I would never have again. I saw my reflection in the dark window, a 62-year-old man in pajamas looking old and defeated. The house creaked around me, settling into the Montana night. My eyes found the wedding photo of Sarah and me on the nightstand. I whispered to her image, telling her that she had tried to warn me not to spoil him. 2 weeks before she passed, Sarah had gripped my hand with surprising strength. She had made me promise not to make him weak. She told me to love him, but not to make him think that the world owed him everything. I had promised her, but I had broken that promise every day since her funeral. Every check I wrote, every problem I solved for him, and every consequence I eliminated, I was making him weak. The transformation began in that moment. Somewhere between the grandfather clock chiming 3 and the first hint of dawn touching the mountains. I wasn't just a hurt father anymore. I was a businessman who had survived corporate betrayals, economic downturns, and cutthroat competition. I had built an empire from nothing, and I could handle one entitled son and his manipulative wife. I walked back to my office and turned on the desk lamp. The awards on the wall, the photographs of construction projects, and the evidence of my strategic mind all felt different now, more purposeful. It was time to stop being the nice dad. I opened my laptop and began accessing the financial records I had kept meticulously over the years. Every guarantee I had signed for Cody and Anna, every credit line I had backed, every insurance policy with me listed as a beneficiary, it was all there in black and white. What I found made my blood run cold. They weren't just living beyond their means, they were drowning. They had credit card debt approaching $60,000 and car loans for vehicles worth less than they owed. They had personal loans from 3 different banks. Anna's shopping addiction was worse than I had thought. She spent nearly $4,000 a month on designer purchases while they claimed to be poor. But the real shock was Cody's gambling. The casino records showed regular losses at the tribal casino outside of town. 20, 30, sometimes even $50,000 in a single night. My son wasn't just entitled, he was addicted. I muttered to myself that they were deeper in debt than I had thought and printed out page after page of financial records. At 6 a.m., I called my friend Jake, who owned the security company I used for job sites. I told him I needed a favor. I asked him if he could install some discrete cameras in my home office and living room and that I needed them today. Next, I called Marcus, a private investigator I had used during a messy contract dispute years ago. His voice was professionally neutral, even at that early hour. I told him I needed him to look into my son and daughter-in-law. I said that I thought they were planning something and that I needed to know what. He replied that family matters were delicate and asked if I was sure I wanted to go down that road. I looked at the financial records spread across my desk, thinking of Cody's cruel words and Anna's calculated manipulation. I told him I was sure. The final step was the hardest. I opened a new spreadsheet and began listing every financial connection I had to Cody and Anna. The credit lines, insurance policies, business guarantees, and emergency funds, everything that tied my financial stability to their irresponsible choices. I could withdraw my support, cancel the guarantees, remove them from insurance policies, and close the emergency credit accounts. It would take careful planning, but I could systematically extract myself from their financial web. They wanted to see me as just money. Fine. Let's see how they handled having no money. I reached for the phone to call Marcus back, ready to schedule our meeting for later that morning. The investigation would begin today. I knew that by the time I was finished, I would know every secret, every lie, and every vulnerability they had. The old Dennis Butler, the one who had sacrificed everything for an ungrateful son, was gone. In his place was someone who understood that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was enabling, and I was done enabling. The next morning, I drove through downtown Billings with my coffee cooling in the travel mug next to me. The familiar route past the courthouse and old library felt different, somehow more purposeful. I parked outside the weathered brick building where Marcus Webb kept his office. It was on the 3rd floor, above a bail bondsman and a tax service. Marcus met me at the elevator, looking exactly like the former police detective he was, steel gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that meant business. His office was cluttered with case files and certificates, with computer monitors covering one wall like a command center. I sat down in the worn leather chair across from his desk and told him that I appreciated him seeing me on such short notice. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and told me that financial investigations were his specialty. I explained the situation to him in a professional manner, keeping my voice level and factual. I told him about Cody's entitlement, Anna's manipulation, their mounting debts, and their obvious plan to extract money from me through guilt and pressure. I concluded that I needed to know exactly how bad their situation was, every debt, every vulnerability, and every mistake they had made. Marcus scribbled notes and nodded. He told me that it would be a standard background financial investigation, and that they would track spending patterns, identify creditors, and monitor their daily activities. He said it would cost $5,000 to start. I wrote the check from my business account without hesitation. I asked him how long it would take. He said I would have a preliminary report in 72 hours and a complete picture in 2 weeks. He leaned back in his chair and told me, as a fair warning, that I might not like what they found. I replied that I was counting on not liking it. Back home, I made a video call to my accountant, Samantha Kim. Her familiar face appeared on my laptop screen, surrounded by the organized chaos of her downtown office. I told her that I needed a complete audit of every financial connection I had to my son and daughter-in-law. Samantha's eyebrows raised slightly. She said that was unusual and asked me why. I told her the lie that I was simplifying my affairs and wanted to know exactly what I was obligated for. 2 hours later, the scope of my financial entanglement was laid out on a spreadsheet. There was $180,000 in loan guarantees, car insurance, health insurance, and phone plans, all under my name. Their luxury apartment lease downtown was co-signed by me when they claimed to have temporary employment gaps. Samantha observed diplomatically that I was more financially tied to them than most people realized. I told her that was about to change. 3 days later, Marcus called me with his preliminary findings. His voice was grim as he told me that my instincts were right. He said that Anna had spent $47,000 on designer purchases alone last year, and that Cody had lost $23,000 at the Billings casino in the last 6 months. I gripped the phone tighter and asked him how much total debt they had. He said they had $31,000 in hidden credit cards across multiple companies, and their combined income barely covered the minimum payments. Marcus paused and said that they were living completely beyond their means and needed a financial miracle to avoid bankruptcy. I quietly said, "Or a generous father." He replied, "Exactly." I spent the evening creating a detailed spreadsheet of their vulnerabilities, every financial support I could legally withdraw, every dependency they had created, and every assumption they had made about my continued enabling. I researched Anna's marketing firm and checked Cody's job security at the construction company. Each weakness was cataloged, analyzed, and turned into an opportunity. My phone rang at 9:30. It was Cody. His voice was forced and casual. He told me that he might have come on a little strong the other night. I told him that maybe he did. He said that he and Anna had been talking and that they realized I probably felt unappreciated and that they wanted to work on that. I just said, "I see." He told me that they had a temporary cash flow problem and that it was nothing serious, just bad timing. He asked me if I could help them out with maybe $5,000 just until they got back on their feet. I told him I would think about it. Silence stretched between us. He repeated back to me, "You'll think about it?" I replied that that was what I had said. After hanging up, I made the first entry in what I decided to call my strategic planning journal. It said that Cody had called, desperate but still manipulative, with no genuine apology. He was still trying to extract money through emotional pressure. I wrote that phase 1 was to begin now. The satisfaction I felt was cold and clean, just like the Montana air outside my window. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely in control. Later that night, I was reviewing my spreadsheet of their vulnerabilities when my phone rang again. Seeing Marcus' name on the screen at this late hour could only mean one thing. His voice crackled through the phone. He told me he had time-sensitive information and that we needed to talk immediately. It was 10:47 p.m., and my desk lamp cast long shadows across the papers. I sat straight in my chair with my notebook open. The wind was rattling the windows outside. I asked him what he had found. He replied that Anna's marketing firm was conducting layoffs next week and that she was definitely on the list. He also said that Cody's construction company had just lost its biggest contract. He told me that their financial house of cards was about to collapse naturally, without any help from me. He said that this was the perfect time for me to pull my support and that I didn't need to destroy them. I just had to stop saving them. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank like a man with a purpose. Janet Walsh, the branch manager, greeted me with her usual professional smile. She asked how she could help me. I told her that I needed to make several account changes and handed her a typewritten list. The list told her to remove my guarantee from my son's business loan, cancel all joint credit cards where I was the primary holder, and stop automatic payments for their car insurance. Janet's smile faltered as she read the list. She asked if I was sure about the significant changes. I told her I was completely sure. Janet proceeded with a growing look of concern. She pointed out that this was my family we were talking about, and I simply said, exactly. From the bank, I drove to the Riverside Towers, the luxury apartment complex where Cody and Anna lived. I met with the property manager, Tom. He was a straightforward guy I'd dealt with on many construction projects. He greeted me warmly and asked what brought me there. I mentioned I knew their lease was ending soon, and he confirmed it. He added that I had been covering their late fees for the past 4 months because they were always behind on rent. I made it clear that I wouldn't be doing that anymore. Tom looked at his computer screen and said their lease expired in 30 days. He said that without my co-signature guarantee, they would have to qualify on their own income, which they couldn't do. I replied that they probably wouldn't. He couldn't hide his sympathy. He said that they would need to find something more affordable, and I said that that was their problem now. That afternoon, my friend Jake from Morrison Security spent the day installing discreet, professional-grade cameras in my home. They were positioned to monitor the kitchen, living room, and front door, and they were nearly invisible. Jake explained that the audio and video feeds would go straight to my phone. I tested the system and saw that the quality was crystal clear. It was perfect. I was able to see and hear everything. I returned to my normal routine over the next 2 days, pretending that nothing had changed. I went to business meetings, made calls to contractors, and watched the evening news in my recliner. But underneath, I felt like a chess player who had just moved his queen into position. Exactly 72 hours after my visit to the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from Cody. He said there was some kind of mistake with their credit card and that it had been declined at the grocery store. He asked me to call the bank. I looked at the message, savoring the moment. I knew it was no mistake. It was the consequence of their actions. That evening, I watched the surveillance cameras on my phone as Anna paced their living room with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was rising as she argued with the credit card companies. Cody was sitting on their expensive couch with his head in his hands, looking lost. Anna's voice was crystal clear when she said that it was impossible and that the card had been fine yesterday. Cody weakly suggested that they call me, but she told him not to dare and that they would figure it out themselves. But even as she said it, I could see the panic in her eyes. For the first time, they were facing consequences without my money to cushion the fall. My phone buzzed again with another text from Cody. He said that they really needed to talk and that something was wrong with all of their accounts. I just smiled and turned off the phone. I would let them sweat. They had 3 weeks until Thanksgiving, when they would sit at my table and finally understand the new rules of engagement. The waiting game had begun. The turkey was golden brown in the oven when I heard Cody's car in the driveway. I had spent the morning setting the dining room table for 3 and polishing Sarah's good china. I tried to appear to be a gracious host despite the knot of anticipation in my stomach. They were 20 minutes late and looked worn down in ways that expensive clothes couldn't hide. Anna's smile was brittle as glass when I opened the door. She gave me an air kiss on the cheek like we were strangers at a cocktail party. Cody looked pale and thinner than he had 3 weeks ago. He thanked me for having them. I noticed the irony of them thanking me for letting them into my own home after weeks of treating me like an ATM with trust issues. I asked them to sit down and told them that dinner was almost ready. The meal started quietly. I carved the turkey while Anna made small talk about the weather and how lovely my vintage house looked. She also mentioned how quaint my traditional table setting was. Each compliment felt like a small knife thrust. Cody just picked at his food. Finally, he worked up the courage to mention their recent banking errors. He said it was the strangest thing and that all of their credit cards had been canceled at the same time, blaming it on some kind of computer glitch. I continued eating calmly. I told him those weren't errors. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Anna's fork froze halfway to her mouth, and she asked me what I meant. I told her that I had canceled the cards, removed my guarantees, and stopped the automatic payments. I buttered my roll with deliberate care. I said that I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was just not enabling them anymore. Anna's mask slipped completely. She said I couldn't just abandon my own son. I replied that I wasn't abandoning him. I was teaching him to stand on his own feet. Anna pushed back from the table and said she needed to be excused for a moment. I knew exactly where she was going. The surveillance cameras would capture her snooping through my study, but I already knew what she would find. The bank statements I had left strategically placed showed my true net worth. She returned 5 minutes later with a flushed face and whispered urgently in Cody's ear. His eyes widened as she spoke. Her voice cracked with disbelief as she said I had $11 million. I told her that yes, I did, and it was mine. She stood now, leaning across the table and saying that Cody deserved his fair share and that they deserved better. She accused me of hoarding money while my own son struggled. I gestured toward their designer clothes and asked her if she thought they were struggling. I reminded her that she spent $47,000 on shopping last year while claiming to be poor. Anna's face went white. She asked me how I knew about their debts. I told Cody that I knew about his gambling losses and the $31,000 in hidden credit cards. I stood slowly, my napkin folded beside my plate. I told them that I knew everything. Cody finally found his voice. He said that I was being selfish and cruel and that they were family. I replied that family doesn't manipulate and threaten, and family doesn't call their father an old money bag. Anna's desperation made her bold. She told me to give them what they were owed or they would take legal action, claiming elder abuse and mental incompetence. She said that they would get what was theirs one way or another. I looked at both of them, my son and his wife, now revealed in their true colors, greedy, manipulative, and entitled, everything I had feared they would become. I told them they were welcome to try. I walked to the front door and held it open. I told them that dinner was over. Anna brushed past me with her parting shot, saying that I would regret this. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to their car disappear into the November night. I quietly said to the empty house that no, they were the ones who would regret this. The dirty dishes could wait. I had phone calls to make. My phone rang while I was scraping cranberry sauce off the good china. Marcus' timing was perfect, as always. He told me that they had gone straight to a lawyer's office after leaving my place and had spent 2 hours discussing estate law. I sat down the plate and walked to my study. I asked him what their angle was. He said they were claiming I was not thinking clearly. His voice carried a grim amusement. He said that Anna had spent the rest of the evening researching guardianship laws online and that desperate people make poor decisions. I said that they were about to make several more. The next morning, I called my attorney, Patricia. Her voice was crisp and professional when I explained the situation. She immediately advised me to document everything, every interaction, every threat, and every attempt at manipulation. She told me to stay within legal bounds and that she wanted to make a new will. She said that was smart and that we would schedule comprehensive estate planning. She said that any recent gifts to my son could be questioned later, and she recommended stopping all financial support immediately. I told her that I had already done that. She told me that they were going to get nasty and asked if I was prepared for that. I told her I was counting on it. Anna's next move was predictably desperate. She started calling my business contacts and spreading rumors about my declining mental health. Michael, my longtime partner, called me Tuesday morning. He told me that he didn't know what was going on with my family, but that Anna Butler was calling everyone he knew and telling them that I was losing it and making irrational decisions with money. I asked him what exactly she was telling people. He said that she was telling people that I was becoming paranoid, cutting off family members, and hoarding money like some kind of miser. His voice was careful. He said that she was asking people to intervene before I hurt myself or the business. I asked him what people were saying. He said that most people thought she sounded unhinged and that her story didn't match reality. I told him to let her keep talking because she was only destroying her own credibility. Wednesday brought Cody to my office building. He appeared in the lobby like a lost child. The security desk called up, and I came down to find him in full theatrical mode, tearful, remorseful, and desperate. He told me that he was so sorry and that I had to believe him when he said that Anna made him do it and that she had been manipulating him for years. Several people in the lobby were watching now, and Cody was performing for an audience, hoping to embarrass me into compliance. I told him that if that was true, then he should leave her. He paused and said, "What?" I told him to prove he was sincere and divorce her today and walk away from her manipulation. His mask slipped. He said he couldn't just abandon her and that that wasn't who he was. I told him that he had made his choice and turned to walk back to the elevator, leaving him standing in the lobby with his crocodile tears and empty promises. The documentation process became my evening routine. Every threatening voicemail from Anna, every manipulative text from Cody, and every lie they told about me went into my files. I was building a legal case for harassment charges if they pushed too far. By Thursday evening, I had a timeline of their escalating demands stretching back 3 years. Every loan request, every guilt trip, and every threat. The pattern was unmistakable. My phone buzzed at 9:30 p.m. It was an unknown number. The voice was disguised, but I recognized Anna's inflection immediately. I said, "Anna?" There was a moment of silence. Then she said in her normal voice that I was going to pay for what I had done to them. I asked her if she was threatening me. She said she was promising me that they would destroy my reputation, my business, and everything I had built. She said that I would give them what they deserved. I hung up and immediately called Marcus. I told him that I needed him to trace the call and add it to my documentation. He told me that he was already on it and that they were spiraling. He said that this was exactly what we wanted. I said that was good because I was ready to show them what real power looks like. The time for defense was over. Tomorrow, I would begin phase 2, and they had no idea what was coming. I hung up the phone and stared at the caller ID. Anna's voice had been unmistakable despite her laughably amateur attempt at disguising it by raising her pitch and adding what she probably thought was a southern accent. The desperation in her tone told me everything I needed to know. I murmured to myself that it was amateur hour and made a note in my file. The recording device I had installed after Marcus's suggestion had captured every word. It was one more piece of evidence for my growing collection. It was time to accelerate the timeline. My first call went to Robert Martinez, my CPA for 15 years. His firm handled taxes for half the successful businesses in Billings. I told him that I needed some audit recommendations and that there was a marketing firm downtown with some questionable financial practices. He asked me what kind of questionable practices. I said that there was unreported income and an expensive lifestyle that didn't match declared earnings. I mentioned that I had reason to believe Anna at Walsh Marketing was not reporting all her compensation. Robert's voice turned professional. He told me that he couldn't initiate anything personally, but if someone were to file a tip with the IRS about potential tax evasion, that anonymous tips were a civic duty. He told me to make sure my hands stayed clean, and I told him that they already were. The IRS tip took 5 minutes to file online. Anna's social media posts showing designer goods worth more than her annual salary would make interesting evidence for the auditors. Next, I drove to the Billings casino. Linda Foster, the security chief, had been dealing with problem gamblers for 20 years. Her office overlooked the main floor through one-way glass. She greeted me and said that she hadn't seen me in ages. I told her I needed to discuss my son's account, Cody Butler. Linda's expression shifted. She said, the markers, and pulled up his file on her computer. She said that according to her information, he had $15,000 plus $300 with interest, and that he had been avoiding their calls. She said that they were considering legal action. I asked her what she would do if I offered to purchase his debt. Linda raised an eyebrow and asked me if I wanted to buy my son's gambling debt. I told her that it was a standard business transaction and a legal transfer of obligations. I would pay them, and I would become his creditor instead of the casino. Linda said that it was unusual but completely legal. Her respect was evident. She called it a smart business move and said it would be a clean transfer with no complications. The paperwork took 30 minutes, and $15,300 was transferred from my business account. Suddenly, Cody owed me instead of some faceless casino operators. Now I controlled his biggest weakness. Lunch with Mark Thompson, who ran Montana Steel Construction, was equally productive. We'd known each other for decades, bid on competing projects, and shared war stories about difficult clients. Mark asked me how Cody was doing these days. I replied that he was having some challenges, including gambling issues and reliability problems. I kept my voice concerned and fatherly. I told him that I thought he should know since I had heard he was being considered for that project manager position. Mark's fork paused halfway to his mouth. I told him that Cody had gambling issues, casino losses, and mounting debts. I also said that he had been missing work to deal with creditors. I said that as his father, I was worried about his decision-making under pressure. Mark said, "Jesus, Dennis, thanks for the heads up." He said that they couldn't afford liability issues on that project. I replied that I wasn't trying to hurt his career, just sharing facts he deserved to know. He said he appreciated my honesty and that family loyalty only goes so far in business. My final stop was George Harrison, who owned Riverside Towers. George had built his real estate empire through careful tenant screening and meticulous record-keeping. I told him that I understood he was reviewing my son's lease renewal. He said that he was, and that without my guarantee, he needed to verify their income independently. He pulled out a thick file and told me that the numbers were not adding up. I asked him what he meant. He said that their declared income versus their spending patterns didn't match and that the credit checks showed massive debt loads. He said that he honestly didn't see how they would qualify for renewal. I replied that I was no longer involved in their housing decisions. He said he understood and that they would do a thorough background and credit verification, as it was standard procedure. Driving home through the December evening, I felt the deep satisfaction of the pieces falling into place. Every move I had made used legitimate business channels. Every consequence they would face would stem from their own choices and actions. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was Marcus. He said that Anna's job situation had just become critical and that an IRS audit notice had been delivered to her firm today. The dominoes were beginning to fall. The snow was just beginning to fall when Marcus called the next morning. I was in my kitchen grinding coffee beans, watching flakes drift past the window like omens of winter. He said that the IRS audit had hit Walsh Marketing yesterday. His voice carried barely contained excitement. He said that Anna's employer was asking some very uncomfortable questions. I poured water into the coffee maker, keeping my voice level. I asked him what kind of questions. He said that Stephanie Walsh wanted to know about Anna's unreported income sources and how someone could afford $47,000 in designer purchases on a marketing coordinator's salary. The coffee began to drip, filling the kitchen with a rich aroma. I asked him what Anna was saying. He said that she had called in sick today. It was her second sick day this week, and Stephanie Walsh's patience was wearing thin. Over the following days, I watched Anna's world crumble through Marcus' careful monitoring. The IRS investigation triggered the firm's accounting department to examine her expense reports more closely. Discrepancies emerged: personal purchases charged to company cards, inflated mileage claims, and mysterious client entertainment expenses with no supporting documentation. "She's panicking," Marcus reported during our Tuesday check-in. "Taking sick days to deal with investigators, but that's only making her look more guilty." The credit card cascade began that same week. Anna discovered her shopping spree at Nordstrom's ended in humiliation when every card was declined. The surveillance footage Marcus obtained through his security contacts showed her meltdown in vivid detail, arguing with the sales associate, demanding to speak with managers, and finally storming out with her face flushed with shame. Emily Chun was very professional, Marcus noted with amusement. Emily managed the designer boutique where Anna had been a regular customer. She just politely declined the cards and suggested Anna contact her financial institution. No drama on the store's part. Anna's desperate attempt to use Cody's credit card failed just as spectacularly. That card had been linked to my guarantee systems, too. The security footage showed her frantically searching through her purse for alternate payment methods while other customers watched with varying degrees of sympathy and amusement. Friday brought the employment termination I've been expecting. Stephanie Walsh, according to my business network sources, couldn't risk her firm's reputation being associated with an IRS tax investigation. "We can't afford association with tax issues," Stephanie had explained to Anna during their final meeting. The conversation relayed through Patricia Chun, who knew Stephanie professionally, had been brief and decisive. Anna's response had been entirely predictable: accusations against me, threats of lawsuits, and claims that I was orchestrating her downfall out of spite. Stephanie's professional response shut down that avenue immediately. "Personal family matters shouldn't affect workplace performance, Anna. These are business decisions." The final outburst came when security escorted Anna from the building. She'd screamed something about suing Dennis Butler for elder abuse and manipulation. The entire scene was witnessed by half the downtown business community during lunch hour. "She's burning every bridge," I observed to Marcus during our evening call, "making herself unemployable." "Gets better," he replied. "The luxury stores are demanding returns of unpaid merchandise." This was news to me. Unpaid store credit, payment plans, deposits on special orders. It turns out Anna's shopping addiction involved a lot of creative financing. When the credit cards got canceled, the payment schedules collapsed. The designer wardrobe repossession began the following week. Collection agencies tracked items through serial numbers and purchase records. Anna's pathetic attempt to hide purchases at a friend's house failed when the agency simply waited for her to retrieve them. Her social media presence, once a carefully curated display of luxury lifestyle, began disappearing post by post. Instagram photos of designer bags and expensive dinners vanished as the facade became impossible to maintain. I found myself checking her accounts with clinical interest, watching the real Anna emerge from behind the designer masks and filters. The most satisfying moment came when Anna attempted to contact my business associates directly, spinning news stories about family emergencies and misunderstandings. The professional community's response was polite but firmly dismissive. Word traveled fast in Billings business circles, and Anna's reputation preceded her calls. Dennis, Anna Butler, tried to schedule a meeting with me. Robert Martinez called to inform me. Said something about resolving misunderstandings and family financial emergencies. I told her my schedule was full through next year. Similar calls came from other colleagues. Anna's isolation became complete and entirely self-inflicted. By December's end, Anna Walsh Butler had no job, no credit, no professional reputation, and no social standing in the community she tried so hard to impress. My phone rang as I watched the evening news. Another update from Marcus about Cody's employment situation. The second phase of natural consequences was about to begin. I was organizing legal documents on my desk when Marcus called with news about Cody's employment crisis. 2 weeks had passed since Anna's complete professional downfall, and winter was settling into Billings with the promise of a harsh season ahead. Cody got fired this morning, Marcus announced without preamble. I set down the contract I'd been reviewing. What was the reason? Jim Patterson cited reliability concerns and debt issues. The background check for his promotion revealed the casino markers and mounting financial obligations. Marcus paused. Your lunch conversation with Mike Thompson started some industry discussions. The construction community in Billings was tight-knit. Information about problem employees traveled through informal networks faster than official channels. Cody's gambling addiction and financial instability had become common knowledge among contractors who couldn't afford liability risks. Jim was genuinely regretful. Marcus continued. Said Cody had potential, but the company couldn't risk exposure to someone with serious debt problems. That afternoon, I had Patricia Chun deliver the formal demand for payment on Cody's $15,000 gambling debt. The certified mail included interest calculations and legal fees with a 30-day payment deadline that everyone knew was impossible to meet. Cody's panicked voicemail came within hours. Dad, what the hell is this? You bought my casino debt. We need to talk. This is my life you're destroying. I saved the message without responding. His life, as if his choices hadn't created every single consequence he was facing. The housing crisis escalated predictably. Riverside Towers refused lease renewal without my financial guarantee, and every apartment application Cody and Anna submitted was rejected due to their debt-to-income ratio. Property managers in Billings shared information about problem tenants, and the Butler name was becoming synonymous with financial risk. George Harrison served them a 30-day eviction notice exactly on schedule. No drama, no personal animosity, just business decisions based on facts and credit reports. I tracked their desperation through my property management contacts. Every application rejected, every backup plan collapsing under the weight of their destroyed credit. The luxury lifestyle they built on my guarantees was revealing itself as the house of cards it had always been. Anna's ultimatum to Cody came during the 3rd week of December. My surveillance system captured their argument in my living room during an attempted visit when I wasn't home. Your father has ruined us completely. Anna's voice was shrill with desperation. Either you fix the situation or I'm filing for divorce. Cody's response was weak, defeated. Anna, he has every right to his own money. She cut him off. Me or your selfish father. Get money from him or lose your marriage. Watching the footage later, I observed Cody's emotional breakdown with detached professional interest. 35 years old, crying like a child because the consequences of his choices had finally arrived. He ruined everything by being selfish. Anna continued her manipulation. Make him pay for what he's done to us. The surveillance system captured everything. Her calculated manipulation, his weak protests, their shared delusion that I owed them financial support regardless of their behavior toward me. Cody's final desperate attempt came on a cold Thursday morning. Security at my office building called to report him in the lobby, demanding to see me. I watched the live feed from my upstairs window as he pleaded with security guards. Please, just tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I understand now. The security guards were professional but firm. Sir, Mr. Butler has left standing instructions. You're not authorized for access. Cody's public emotional breakdown in the lobby was witnessed by everyone entering the building during morning business hours. His tearful apologies to the security cameras, his pathetic promises of reform and repayment. All of it performed for an audience that included half the local business community. I watched from my office window as he finally left after security threatened trespassing charges. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of consequences he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding. That evening, my phone rang with an urgent call from building security. The cameras had detected movement in my driveway. Cody and Anna were approaching my house for what would surely be their final desperate attempt at manipulation. It was time to end this once and for all. The security system's alert chimed softly as I activated the recording equipment throughout my house. 3 weeks had passed since Cody's public breakdown at my office, and their complete financial and social collapse was now a matter of public record in Billings. Through the surveillance monitors, I watched them walking up my driveway in the December evening darkness. The Christmas lights on neighboring houses created a stark contrast to their shabby appearance. Anna without her designer accessories, Cody carrying what appeared to be legal documents or desperate pleas. They looked defeated, hollow-eyed, shadows of the entitled people who demanded my $11 million just a month ago. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. I checked the intercom screen, seeing Cody's face pressed close to the camera, Anna standing slightly behind him with her head down. Dad, Cody's voice cracked through the speaker. Please, we need to talk. We're sorry. We made terrible mistakes. I remained silent, watching. Anna stepped forward, her voice artificially humble. Dennis, we realized we were wrong about everything. We've learned our lesson. Their admission of financial ruin came pouring out. No jobs, no home, no credit, no prospects. Cody's emotional breakdown was genuine this time, not performed. I should have listened to you, Dad. I should have appreciated everything you gave me. But even in defeat, Anna's strategic mind was working. We'll pay you back everything. We'll work for you to earn forgiveness. People will judge you for abandoning family in their time of need. Still, I said nothing, analyzing their continuing manipulation, even in desperation. They hadn't changed. They'd simply run out of options. Finally, I spoke through the intercom, my voice measured and calm. You called me an old money bag. You were absolutely right. The silence on the other side was complete. Money was all you ever saw in me, Cody. Not a father, not a person, just a source of funds for your lifestyle. I paused, letting the words sink in. You chose greed over gratitude. Now live with the consequences. Dad, please. I gave you everything. Education, opportunities, bailouts, second chances. You gave me nothing but contempt and demands. My voice remained steady. You abandoned me first when you decided I was just dollar signs with inconvenient emotions attached. Anna's mask finally slipped completely. You can't abandon family. You're supposed to. This conversation is over. I clicked off the intercom and engaged the security system's lockdown mode. Through the upstairs window, I watched them stand in the cold for several minutes, their arguments beginning as reality set in. Finally, they walked away into the darkness, their voices fading as they disappeared down the street. The house settled into peaceful quiet around me. No more manipulation, no more demands, no more guilt trips disguised as family obligations. 6 months later, I deleted the surveillance files and placed the family photographs face down in a drawer. My business thrived without the constant drain of family financial emergencies. My home was peaceful without the tension of expected manipulation. The construction industry in Billings knew the full story by then. How a successful businessman had finally established boundaries with family members who saw him as an ATM rather than a person. The response had been universally supportive from people who understood that enabling destructive behavior wasn't love. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes protecting yourself requires cutting ties with people who refuse to respect boundaries. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the natural consequences of their choices. I kept no photos, maintained no contact, and felt no regret. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through the simple act of stopping my enabling behavior and allowing their own actions to determine their fate. The old money bag was finally free.